I want to welcome you to our next session, which is active bystandership and in law enforcement and corrections. And it's my honor to introduce our speaker, Dr. Abigail Tucker. Dr. Tucker is a nationally recognized expert in police and public safety psychology, working with law enforcement, corrections staff, emergency responders, and veterans. She teaches emergency responder and military psychology at Colorado State University, Global, and Nova Southeastern University. She is also a certified instructor for the ABLE Project and co-founder of HEROES Active Bystandership Training, which she's going to explain those to you. We're going to hold our questions till the end, and if you would submit those through the app, that's super helpful, and then our virtual audience also has the benefit of hearing the questions. And I just wanted to add, too, I had the opportunity to attend a HEROES training in Sacramento, California. They were doing it for the Department of Corrections, and it was a full room of teams from different institutions throughout California. And I sat through the first day of that and was so impressed with the response from the instructors, but also the students. They were so responsive, they active participation, and just because sometimes you go to those trainings and people are quiet, they don't interact, and this team, it was so amazing to see, and that was one of the reasons that I wanted to have Abigail here with us today, and I don't want to take too much time because she has a full hour for us, so I'm going to turn it over to Abigail.
Thank you so much, Sheila. And actually, folks, I have already been that presenter today that said, ooh, could I have a handheld mic? And ooh, I made a last-minute change. And the tech folks in the back and everybody from CIS has been absolutely amazing. I do a fair amount of conferences. Wonderful. Thank you so much. I do a fair amount of conferences. I've been really impressed here, and I'm really grateful. I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind joining me in a round of applause, thanking everybody behind the scenes. Thank you so much. They've been fantastic. So, okay, folks, raise a quick hands. How many of you have ever seen the sign, see something, say something? Or you've heard it on the PA system and train systems, right? Yeah, me too, folks. And as somebody who travels a fair amount, also, I'm one of those geeky rule followers, right? I see a rule and I instantly think, oh gosh, that's me. And what exactly am I looking for? And will I know if it's the thing that I'm supposed to see something? And if I do, who do I tell? And how do I tell them, right? And I have come to learn that even those logistical questions are just scratching the surface on all the reasons why see something, say something is not enough to prevent risk and to promote public safety, which is really what those signs are designed to do. Well intended. And it's not because I don't care. Certainly I care for my own well-being and the people that I work for. And that's another layer of active bystandership that I'm excited to share with you all today. I am going to get into the programs that Sheila mentioned, ABLE, which is Active Bystandership for Law Enforcement, and HEROES, which is for Corrections, Fire and Rescue, and Public Safety. I'm happy to share more about the difference between the two, but Sheila is correct. I became an ABLE national instructor in 2021, and that provides that training for law enforcement. And when I found out that they were going to stick to law enforcement and not do corrections and fire and rescue, which they have good reasons to do so, I became part of a group of 3 that co-founded HEROES to bring this training to others in public safety and criminal justice. I have had the pleasure, and I truly mean the pleasure, even though they're certainly tough times, of working in jails and working for a sheriff's office. And so I know firsthand that you need quality training to protect both sides of the house. It is not enough to provide a training for law enforcement and then give the sloppy seconds to corrections, which I certainly have experienced in my career. It's important that people have culturally competent training for the work that they do, because that's how we manage risk and we get the outcomes that we really want to have. Now, quick raise of hands if what you do or the agency you work with is totally law enforcement, patrol, law enforcement base. Thank you so much. Okay. Raise your hands if that also includes or you specifically work in corrections, jails, detention. Okay, a couple of hands. All right, that's helpful. So For the rest of the audience who probably haven't already stalked me on LinkedIn or Google search, because I do train a lot of law enforcement and corrections, and my experience is that people have already started researching to see if I'm credible. You can tell me later if I fit that bill or not. For those of you who didn't, again, I'm Abigail Tucker. I am a licensed psychologist in Denver, Colorado. And one of the things that I want to highlight, folks, is that in addition to doing training, before I got into doing training, I was working in a community mental health center, I was working in jails, I was working alongside law enforcement in their programs, and I became really passionate about this work because I actually wanted to be a cop when I first started out in my career, when I was a little tiny baby Abigail. And I come from a family of firefighters, state patrol, probation. I was also the only girl at that time in my cousins, and I got really nicely coached into, you should go get a degree. That's what police are doing these days. So I went and got my degree in psychology. I fell in love with it, and I kind of just kept going. And I was really fortunate to find a career that fit both of those values for me. One of the things that I share when I'm teaching active bystandership for law enforcement and corrections is that my true why is very, very clear. In all those years working side by side with folks in that, and currently now I do keep a very small private practice, suicide prevention is one of my primary focus and passions. And I'm sure that many of you will join me that the rate of death by suicide in law enforcement, corrections, and fire and rescue is unacceptable. What frustrates me the most, or what has frustrated me to now, is having been a part of peer support teams. Anybody here raise a hand on a peer support team? Okay, thank you for your great work. Also helping develop wellness programs and working with as an EAP contracted provider. What I know is that all the most amazing health and wellness resources for your workforce are not worthless if they're not being used. They don't magically come to you. And what I observed is that we need to exercise everybody to engage to protect the health and safety of all of us. And meaning to say that I would much rather see people show up into my private practice because a colleague or a friend intervened and said, hey man, I'm worried about you, than see people in my office because they're forced to. That's really no fun for me or for them, right? That's no fun for anybody. I also want to, if I'm gonna be real direct, I wanna stop attending funerals and have people say, man, I wish I would have said something. And that is not to chastise that, because survival guilt is real. I want to sit compassionately for that and say there is a better way. And that better way, I believe strongly, is active bystandership. So with that, folks, I want to share with you 3 goals that I have for today, and you can hold me accountable either for our virtual audience online through the chat. For folks of you who are in person here, you can do through the app. Please submit questions. I'll make sure that we make time at the end of this session for Q&A. I have given Katie the permission and authority. It's a big part of active bystandership, right, is giving people of trust permission and authority, that if she sees a question that looks like it's burning, she'll interrupt and flag me down. But also, folks, please, please, please note that there's going to be ways to contact me in this PowerPoint presentation. My credentials are in the app. I would be more than welcome to take any questions that you have, and I'm going to be here the rest of today and tomorrow morning. So please come find me if we can further that conversation. So, right, so what I wanted to share with you folks is that I got 3 goals. Number 1, many of you maybe are here because they have great breakfast and coffee and CIS does a fantastic conference. Maybe See Something, Say Something caught your eye, and maybe you want to know what active bystandership is. But one of my goals is that we all walk away here with a better understanding about what the heck active bystandership is. That's goal number 1. Goal number 2 is that you walk away with and why is it important in public safety? And when I refer to public safety, folks, I mean everybody. Law enforcement, fire and rescue, EMS, PSAPs, corrections, I mean the whole family. So what is active bystandership? Why does it matter? And the other thing I really hope that you'll join me with by the end of today, if you're not already there, and if you are, thank you, is that for something as important as active bystandership training in public safety, you need high quality training. These are not policy mandates where you just say, please do something or don't do something, and then we turn around and wonder why our workforce keeps doing or not doing the things that we want or expect from them, right? The work of public safety is important, and it deserves high quality training. And I'll talk more about what that is here in a moment. All right. So I want to start actually with an example. I talked a little bit about why this is important to me. Active bystandership, I know and have appreciated, is a skill set that when done well can help reduce mistakes, prevent misconduct, and promote health and wellness, right? It's not designed to replace your health and wellness resources or your peer support. You need those. I was excited to hear about all the grants this morning that CIS does to support health and wellness in your departments. But I believe you also need active bystandership to leverage those resources to intervene. And I want to bring you an example that comes from a sheriff's office, right? So my background is in sheriff's offices, and I'm, as most of you know, but the general public doesn't know that most sheriff's office, you're required to run a jail, and sometimes you're required to offer a couple other services depending on your state, but the patrol is not always. And in this particular example that I'm bringing to you, it is one of those sheriff's offices where they have patrol, they also have dispatch, and they are operating a jail, a rather large jail by way of counties in this state. The names and the places have been changed for obvious reasons so that I can share this with you all. But at this jail, we have Deputy Lopez. Deputy Lopez has been working in the jail for about 2 years. This is his first entry into the sheriff's office. He has his eye on the prize. For those of you who work in sheriff's offices, you know what I mean. He wants on patrol. That's where he really wants to be. But he's starting in the jail, and he's ready to get going. He's about 2 years in this job, and he's known for having a real level head. He's kind of quiet, but he knows how to manage himself, manage his emotions. And the other thing about Deputy Lopez is he's always willing to help. In fact, on this particular day, he was working overtime yesterday, and now he's pulling an extra shift helping out because somebody was sick. And this is par for the course for Deputy Lopez. It's also par for the course for most sheriff's offices in the United States these days, the way staffing is. So Deputy Lopez actually gets brought in because 2 other deputies, road patrol deputies, bring in a suspect who is quite loud and quite boisterous. So for those of you who have not worked in a jail before, it can be really loud. It's not always loud, but it can be really loud. I mean, not just the clanking of doors, but in this holding cell, if you're not familiar, I want to kind of paint a picture. And imagine that actually this area is about the size of this stage, right? And so the nurse has her little corner over there as she triages people coming in. There might be sort of a bench where suspects, soon to be incarcerated persons are sitting and waiting while they're being processed by some classifications. And down at the end is sort of where they get pulled in, from the back, right? Depending on it, looks different in different county jails. And in this one, 2 deputies have just brought in this suspect. So they're sitting down at the end and they're talking to classification, and they're also there with a sergeant because this individual is being quite loud. Most often people just sit there and await, but he's not doing so, right? He's screaming and yelling and making a ruckus. Not incredibly uncommon in jails. So Deputy Lopez is called down from the other side of booking to basically sit on him, right? Like, sit on him, keep him calm. We don't need him riling up everybody else who's in here. And for a while, Deputy Lopez, par for the course, people yelling at you and screaming at you when you're in law enforcement and certainly in jail. So he's standing there and he's just taking it in stride as this guy keeps going. But he just doesn't let up, man. He does not let up. And he's throwing everything at Lopez, everything that he can think of. And he starts upping the ante to include racial slurs, ethnic slurs, the whole 9 yards. Again, Lopez has certainly experienced this before. Lopez's commands back to him start getting a little bit louder, like, hey, man, cool down. He's trying to use all his de-escalation skills. They're not working, so he's jumping to, I need you to sit down. I need you to shut up. Calm down, keep it cool, and nobody else is really registering or involving. So while Deputy Lopez is over here, everybody else is over there still working, no problems. Nobody's intervening at this point. And then the incarcerated person starts standing up, right? Starts posturing. So Deputy Lopez, right, uses all of his appropriate skills to, you need to get seated. And he does start to say to the nurse, how much time do we got here, right? Like, where are we going? How long are we waiting? We need to get things moving. And still, nobody kind of intervenes at that point. At that point, he gets up again, and this time Deputy Lopez actually raises his voice, very uncommon for him, commands him back down, gets him back seated, and then makes kind of a rushed comment to the nurse about, hey, can we keep things going? You can fill in the blanks for what he might have said to the nurse at that point in time. And as he turns back to the inmate does that thing that is just absolutely puts most people over the edge. He spits right in his face. And in what feels like an eternity to Lopez when he later gave his report, but on cameras takes about 30 to 40 seconds, you see Lopez take a sidestep back, wipes his face, looks absolutely in shock, looks around, turns, and then slams him into the wall and says, I told you to sit down and shut up. And at that point in time, the lieutenant leaves from at the end of this podium here, if you will, comes down, has one of the other patrols sit on him, and takes Lopez out. He's written up, and as you can imagine, that's not a really good end for Lopez and his desires for career. So folks, I want you to know that this story is real, but what's more important to me is, does anybody know somebody like Deputy Lopez? Somebody who starts their career with vigor, all the right intentions, right? Wants to do good work, has goals, right? But they have that one day, that one mistake, that one moment, and they can't go back in time, right? It doesn't mean that Lopez was a horrible person. He certainly was not, I can assure you of that. And I'd like you to just take a moment and reflect on your own. For that example, when somebody in your career is no longer in their job because of a mistake, maybe it was misconduct, maybe they're no longer in their job because the pressures of the job, right, ended their career too soon. Who was harmed? What was the harm? Do you still think about that? I mean, folks, I do this training across the country for law enforcement and corrections, and I've heard a lot of stories about this. Most people have an example that comes to mind super quick. And the question I always like to ask is, were there other people there who were witnessing the harm, who also saw what was happening? And for many of you, I bet your example happened over a course of days, weeks, months, sometimes even years, right? It doesn't always happen in a split second like it did for Lopez, although I'd like you to think about what could have been happening in the days, weeks, hours prior to that specific event for Deputy Lopez. And something I'd like you to just think about, reflect, or certainly for our virtual audience, they can pop it in, is that what would be the harms for Deputy Lopez? I mean, certainly his job was impacted, but as you can imagine, lawsuits, right? New policy mandates, all those lawsuits cost money. There is always an impact beyond those individual moments of mistakes, misconduct, and health and wellness. So I promised you that we'd walk away with a definition of active bystandership, but it's important that we take a step back. Folks, if you do not know who Dr. Irvin Staub is, I encourage you to perhaps write down his name and learn more. Dr. Irvin Staub, and if you Google search Irvin Staub, BBC article, there's actually a really nice history about his life and why he got into this work. It's pretty powerful. You will not be disappointed if you listen to that article. But Dr. Irvin Staub is a world-renowned researcher in active bystandership and harm prevention. And this is his definition, and I rather like it. A witness who is in a position to know that there is a need for positive action and is in a position to take some form of action. I want you to go back to our Deputy Lopez. Were there bystanders? Were there people there who were in a position to know? Were they in a position to do something about it? One could argue yes. I certainly would argue yes, right? And so keeping in mind that that's the definition of a bystander, but I want to expand that, right? Y'all came to learn about active bystandership. There's actually two types, though. So first, I want to start with what you see here on your right. I think that's your right. Nope, that's your left. Sorry, that's my right. I won't quit my day job, become like a yoga instructor where I have to memorize my left and rights for the audience. All right, so if you're a passive bystandership, folks, there's sort of a double whammy with this. A passive bystander, remember that definition, right? They're in a position, and they're in a position to know that there's potential harm, and they're in a position to do something about it. I want to use Lopez's example. You know who's not in a position to do something about it? Maybe his direct sergeant who is in another module across the jail, right? That he's not in a position to do anything about it. He's not there, physically there in that moment, right? That's the difference. But a passive bystander is somebody who witnesses the potential harm and does not intervene. There's a double whammy here, folks. Number one, we miss the opportunity to reduce the potential harm or prevent it altogether. And here's the worse yet, we unintentionally communicate to people around that we're okay with what's happening. And that's the worst part about passive bystandership. Hey, we all make mistakes. I'm here to tell you that I love this stuff. I've learned a lot about it. Unfortunately, not until later in my career. So I have made the mistake of not intervening. And it's that realizing that I might have communicated that I was okay with what happened that motivates me to do something afterwards. And so thinking about that passive bystandership, folks, as we shift to active bystandership, where we take action. Now, I am not promising perfection here, folks. I certainly do not mean to tell you that if you train in active bystandership and if you adopt that culture that you're never going to have mistakes, misconduct, or health and wellness issues. I would be doing very different things with my life if I had the secret to that. So what I am promising, though, is that active bystandership decreases the likelihood of harm. It also sends a message of this is not okay. That's really important, is that message as well. So what I want to ask you here, folks, is that what you don't see on that slide is anything that says neutral. Because when it comes to active bystandership, there is no such thing as neutral. But we like to tell ourselves that. In fact, we actually have sayings in all of your workplaces that falsely communicate a place of neutral that doesn't exist. I would love, if anybody are open to it, if you could pop it into the app or put it on the online chat. I might check with Katie to see if she gets any good answers. But my question to you is, what are the phrases in your workplace that communicate falsely that there is a place of neutral? And you'll know it because what these sayings communicate is, I'm not going to do anything about this, but I know that something's wrong. And I want you to think about it. I'm going to keep an eye on Katie if people are putting anything into the app or an online chat around what are the phrases in your organization that falsely communicate that. But I'm going to give you one that I have used in the past, and that is above my pay grade. Right? Sometimes once you give an example, the others start rolling in here. So let me know if we get any good ones, Katie. But what I would offer to you is that the next time you go to use one of those phrases, above my pay grade, and I'll bet every single one of you has one in your organization that you've used, the next time you go to use that phrase, I am sorry, not sorry, but I hope you remember this moment, that essentially what you're doing is you're falsely communicating that there is a place of neutral, and that is not true. What those phrases really do is keep us in passive bystandership. Go ahead, Katie.
I do have one received here from Sherry Allen. It's stay in your lane.
Yes.
Another one from Jonathan, not my monkey, not my zoo, not my call. Another one from Jennifer is not in my department, excuse me.
Not my department.
Stay in my lane. I'm not qualified to address that, from Melissa. And then Joanna says, that's not in my job description.
Oh, good one. Oh, I haven't heard that one in a while. Great one. Nice. Yeah. Every single one of you, I'm sure, has one of these. And so, yeah, I should also share that I am also a mom of a 14-year-old, so the sorry, not sorry phrase comes a little bit too easy to me. But yeah, those phrases all communicate that there is a place of passive that is actually neutral, and it's not true. So I encourage you to think about that, because those are the small ways, when we tend to those sayings, those are the small ways that we start to shift. Right? We start to make those micro shifts away from the comfortable into the uncomfortable place. So speaking of potentially uncomfortable, Sheila, if you are comfortable joining me, I'm going to use Sheila as a reference here. There's actually a whole lot of reasons that people do not intervene, and it's not just because they're good and bad people. Many of you raised your hand and said that you've seen the signs that says, see something, say something. And I'm here to tell you that I know that sometimes I've seen those signs, and I might not have reported like a bag that looked like, I'm not really sure whose bag that is, right? But it doesn't look suspicious, and I need to catch this plane. And it doesn't mean, or at least I hope it doesn't mean, that I'm a horrible person, right? So there's a difference as to why people don't engage. There's actually a litany of research from Dr. Irvin Staub and others, and I want to bring to you one example. So we're going to use a little game show, and I very much appreciate Sheila coming up here to help make it a bit more visual. So this research comes to you from Darlie Latané, and Darlie and Latané were doing research at NYU, New York City University, in the 1960s. And what they told students, who were all of their subjects in the research experiment, what they told the students was, come on in and be a participant in a research study about what it's like to be a student in a busy urban environment. Pretty straightforward, right? Like if you're an NYU student, this should be pretty easy. I'm sure they threw them a couple bucks, so they signed up, right? So when students said that they wanted to sign up and do this, they would come in and let's say they would meet with an experimenter like me. It's hard to imagine me as a stuffy experimenter. I am a psychologist, but I'm a clinical psychologist. Don't put me in a research lab. I would break everything. So I want you to imagine that Sheila is the student who comes in. And as I am walking Sheila down to her room, right, you can see on the slide here that imagine they've got this hallway, right? They've got this huge hallway, and I'm taking her to her room, which just, let's imagine it's this first door on the left. And as I enter Sheila into the room, I let her know of thanks for coming to do this study about why it's hard to be a student in a busy urban environment. I really want everybody to participate, and so this intercom system that you see here, there's a couple of things to know about it. First, you cannot interrupt each other, because I want people to be able to speak without interruption. But because I don't want people to go on and on and on, there's a 2-minute timeline, and then it's going to turn off. And third, I'm not going to be listening in. I really want you to speak freely, so it's just you and the other students openly speaking free. Okay, yep, Sheila's got it. Here's the deal. Sheila is the only student, right? Those sneaky research psychologists, they're just basically lying. It's called research deceit, right? But she doesn't know that. As far as Sheila is concerned, there are lots of other students in this experiment with her, right? I just lead her to believe that they're there. All those other students are just recordings. And so the first recording, because we run this experiment one time where Sheila believes it is just her and one other student. And this one other student who is in a recording will state in their introduction that they have a history of seizures. And later on in the conversation, this one student here, again, recording, will actually start to slur their words. They'll start sputtering. They'll actually say, I think I feel like a seizure's coming on. And then Sheila will hear, and it will go silent. And what the researchers wanted to know is, what percentages of Sheila's get up and out of her room to go check on this student, right? Because as far as Sheila is concerned, I'm not listening in, right? That student can't keep talking and asking for help because that 2-minute cut off, and they want to know, is Sheila, what percentage of those students come up and leave? But they run this experiment 3 different ways. One is just the way I described it. Then they run it again where Sheila is led to believe it is her, the one student having the seizures, and another student, right? You see on the slide there's that door all the way at the end of the hallway. And then in the final way they run it, it is Sheila, she's led to believe it's the student having the seizures, and 3 other students, right? Like it wraps all the way around that hallway. So she's led to believe she's one of many. So I want to kind of get your all feedback on this. I promise not to hold out. We'll give you some of the results here in a minute. But For the percentages of Sheilas that leave the room to go check on the student in the seizure, in our first way that we run that, when she's led to believe it is just her and that student, raise your hand if you think more than 50% of Sheilas left the room to go check on the student having the seizure. Okay, we got hands in the room. Okay. Raise your hand if you think more than 70% of Sheilas left the room to go check on the student having the seizure. Okay, I've instantly diagnosed all of my non-law enforcement people who have faith in humanity and just raised their hands there. Fantastic, okay. Anybody want to go 100%? Anybody going 100%? Like true faith in humanity. I want to find you and declone you. Okay, not yet. All right, let's do the next round. Okay, so in this next round, Sheila is led to believe it is her. It is the student having the pretend seizure, and now there's another student. Now raise your hands if you think, let's go again, 50% of Sheilas leave the room to go check on the student. Ooh, a lot less hands. Okay, 50%. I'm gonna actually, how about 60%? I get a couple of like hesitant people of like, I really wanna believe, but I'm not sure, right? Okay, let's do the final round. So it is Sheila, the student having the pretend seizure, and Sheila is led to believe it is all these other students. Based on the last number, I'm actually gonna go down. Raise your hand if you think at least 40% of Sheila's left the room to go check on the student having the seizure in that final round. I got a couple of hands, okay? 30%. Okay, 20%. See, now all the cops just raised their hand, right? All right, we're not gonna go all the way to the end because I just need to leave here today with some faith in humanity. Quick raise of clap. Thank you so much for Sheila. She's eager to get off the stage, I'm sure. All right, I'm not gonna leave you hanging here, folks. So let's give you the results here. So actually what Darley and Latine found in the first round, when the subject, meaning in this case it was Sheila, thank you very much again, when she believed it was just her and nobody else could hear the seizure, 85% of Sheilas left the room to go check. Okay, that was kind of in line, right? We got up to over 70, I think we got into the 80s. When one other person could hear, 62%, but when we added all those other pretend students, 31%. Folks, I am not a research psychologist. There's a fancy term, I believe, called statistical significance there. But what I like to say is, that's a big deal, man. Like, that is a major change in human behavior just by adding more people. I want to keep in mind that Sheila in this did not change. The same person who she thought it was just her and that other student went and checked, and the same person was less likely to check when they added more people. So it is not as if the person changed, but the adding more people changed. So there's some fancy words here that I'd like to share with you, and mainly just because they really helped me unpack this and understand. So the first one is called diffusion of responsibility, and that's just a fancy word of saying somebody else is gonna do it. I mean, raise your hands if in your workplace you know that the somebody else is going to do it leads to mistakes happening or people not addressing things or not taking care of it, right? I mean, the lunchroom refrigerator enough is to know that people fall prey to diffusion of responsibility all the time. Someone else is going to take out that rotten, smelly thing that's been there for 3 weeks, right? And I also, as you know, live in a house of teenagers. Man, that's somebody else. They don't do a lot of things around the house that I think are supposed to get done, like unloading the dishwasher. Somebody else is going to do that for sure, right? But there's another layer of this, and it can happen at the same time, but usually not at the same time for the same person. It can happen in the same time in a group of people, and that's called pluralistic ignorance. And this is just a fancy way of saying, am I the one who's wrong here? So folks, this one applies to me. I definitely have diffusion of responsibility sometimes. I'd be lying to you if I said that I didn't. But what I know for a fact, after I learned about this, and I went back into the Rolodex of all of my experiences where I did not intervene, and I darn well should have, pluralistic ignorance was a big one. Apparently, I always think I'm wrong. Apparently, I always think that everybody else knows better and I don't, right? So I walk into a situation, I'm pretty sure that we're not supposed to be doing it like this or something's wrong, and I don't say anything because I immediately, in the presence of others, start to second guess my intuition that something is wrong, right? If I was all by myself and I saw that issue, I'd probably just fix it or correct it or stop doing it. But when I look around, and I'm going to share with you folks, especially as a psychologist, when I'm in a room with all of you cops and corrections and firefighters, and you're all not doing something, I really start to question whether or not I am the one who's misunderstanding what's happening here. It turns out I'm not alone in that's really common in human beings. So that's pluralistic ignorance. I'd love for folks to either use the app or use the chat feature for the virtual audience. And I would love to hear in where you work, you don't have to be in public safety, folks. This is human science. It happens everywhere. In where you work, what are the examples of where pluralistic ignorance or diffusion of responsibility keeps people from intervening when there is potential harm? And the other way I would describe this, I love seeing like people's heads goes down and start putting in the app. That's fantastic. So please go right, keep doing that. Is that where in your workplace is there a known area of risk, but when we add more people to the event, it decreases the likelihood that people are going to do something about it. Right? And so certainly, Katie, you've got permission to just wave that hand if you've got any good examples coming through. But I'd encourage you to think about this, folks, and come up with a specific example. And if you leave here today and you're like, no, I can't think of a single one, please come and find me so we can brainstorm together, because I've really not met anybody who doesn't have an example in their workplace where suddenly everybody stops taking action when other people are around. So it's important to understand those. Yes, Katie?
So I do have a couple of comments that have come in so far. I have one that says, when you're on the phone, videotaping situation instead of helping. Another comments bullying as an example, or a chain of command or expectations from positions. Another person commented the put down humor that occurs, gossiping or negative comments. Quote, that's the way he is, unquote.
Oh, that's the way they are, right? It's usually that false neutrality statement. Great example of that one. Absolutely, right? And, I want to go back to when somebody said gossiping or bullying. I mean, man, I thought middle school was bad, and then I started working in public safety, and holy cats, that gossip train is like wildfire. And so one of the things that I like to offer about active bystandership is that actually sometimes active bystandership can play a significant role, because sometimes we don't know how to intervene. We don't have the skills to do it. We know that it's wrong, right? We know that it's not helpful, but we don't want to be seen as the snitch, right? We don't want to be seen as the lame person. In fact, when I start my ABLE and HEROES trainings, I often start the day by asking, how many people here think that they've just been volunteered to the snitch program? And I usually get a couple of people who are willing enough to raise their hands, even though I know there's more people in the room that think that, right? And so, yeah, when it comes to active bystandership, it's important to understand the why behind it. And certainly, as we discussed in the Darley and Latne social science experiment, we know that sometimes people are less likely to intervene simply because there's more people in the room. I want you to think really quickly, folks, about Deputy Lopez, okay? Again, I don't know if any of you have had this experience, but I'm thinking about times I was working in the jail in the mental health unit, and it's loud, man. The doors are slamming, people are screaming. It's not all that uncommon, right? And I gotta tell you what, I'm just trying to get my notes done, man, right? Like, I wanna get to the end of shift, I'm just trying to get my notes done, and simply that other people are around, I definitely know that I have fallen prey to, I bet somebody else is going to take care of that inmate who's screaming. And I'm sure the deputies are going to be like, where the heck is this mental health woman who's going to take care of that screaming inmate, right? And the nurse is like, who's taking care of that screaming inmate? And we're all just sitting around thinking somebody else is going to do it. Where I can make darn sure that if it was like I came in on a weekend to do work, and it was just 2 deputies, and I knew that one deputy was out taking his lunch, so it's just the one deputy, and it's just me and the charge nurse, I wouldn't have batted an eyelash. I would have got out of my darn seat, and I would have said, what's going on? How can I help? Because I wouldn't have assumed that somebody else was going to do it, right? Also, pluralistic ignorance, I want us to think about, again, Deputy Lopez, who's standing there. Perhaps a lieutenant and those deputies were having diffusion of responsibility, but also perhaps they thought, well, maybe he's fine with it. Maybe I don't want to cut him. He knows what he's doing, right? Maybe he's okay with it. They start having pluralistic ignorance instead of intervening. One of the things that Katie said from the chat is that I think I heard like some things about rank and hierarchy, and that's huge. That's another reason. This is a really smart group about why people don't intervene, even when they definitely want to. I want to bring you another reason, folks, that sometimes people don't intervene, and it is because the work is hard. I don't have to tell any of you this. You all know this. Even if you don't work in public safety, I'm going to imagine that your affiliate role, you know that the work is hard. There's a reason that these grants from CIS exist to promote health and wellness for people working in public safety. The rates of death by suicide, how about people making it to retirement and not living a year past that? Unacceptable. Unacceptable, right? And people, PTSD, people getting physical health injuries. The work is hard and it's cumulative and it just keeps coming and it wears you down. And that is a reason, folks, that often some are not intervening because they're just tired. And it's a twofold double whammy here. Number one, they might actually just be so tired and so burnt out and so all the things that they don't even notice that harm is occurring. That is a real phenomenon, that we get so wrapped up in our own place of just getting through the day and just getting through this shift that we don't even notice that our own colleagues might be struggling or that they're starting to make some mistakes that can start tumbling. And the other reason that burnout, right, that psychological fatigue is so dangerous because it is a risk factor for why we don't intervene is because it starts creating a culture of, well, this is just how it is. There's some really great organizations. I'm betting there are some fantastic organizations here in this room who are doing really cool things with health and wellness. It doesn't have to be the be-all, end-all, and I believe that creating an active bystandership culture can help your organization not accept that as a reality. The great news is that active bystandership is a skill that can be learned. To be very clear though, folks, as far as I'm concerned, it's a perishable skill. So you don't just like pop out of the womb and boom, you're an active bystander. Like, that's not how it works. I can give you tons of examples to help clarify that point. We want to believe that though in society, right? When we love to like other people and put people into groups, and we want to believe, well, you're a good person because you intervened and you're a bad person because you didn't. And I used to believe that, and I know that I fall prey to that sometimes, but I've learned throughout this work that it's just not that easy. People can have amazing intentions, and there's actually some people who have real questionable character who have intervened at the right time and the place to prevent harm. Because it's not about your moral character, it is about all these other inhibitors. We heard some of them already from you all today. Rank, perhaps it's pluralistic ignorance, perhaps it's compassion fatigue. There are tons others about why people don't intervene. But the second important part is it requires the skills. Because let's be clear, folks, active bystandership is not snitching. And it's not ankle biting, right? The goal here is to have each other's back, just like public safety always does, but to give the skills to intervene so that we're not just, biting or chomping at rank. We're not breaking rank here, right? We're not trying to get everybody else in trouble. In fact, far to the contrary, we're trying to prevent harm. So it's a skill, and it needs to be learned. And I would like to bring to you one skill. Sheila mentioned that she came and attended one of our trainings in California. Both Able and Heroes, and I'll explain this in a minute, they're a one-time 8-hour training for the workforce that then has annual reinforcements after it because it's a perishable skill, and it's a 3-day train the trainer. So I'm trying to bring it down to y'all in about 1 hour here, which is a real challenge for me. As you can tell, I like to talk, certainly about things I'm passionate about, but I can't just have you learn what I taught you already and then let you leave here without a skill. So I'm going to bring you one. And it comes from a wonderful friend, Dr. Irvin Staub, right? Remember that researcher? And this model that he put together, the 3 Ds we call them, he actually developed it for the armed forces to help prevent sexual assault. It's pretty simple. It reminds me of a lot of other skills that once you learn them, you're like, duh, I knew that, except maybe I haven't been doing it all the time. And the 3 Ds are like that, right? So it's direct, delegate, and distract. It's not a linear thing, you know, this isn't like a use of force continuum where you got to go from one to another. You can kind of jump to where you need to go. And it's pretty straightforward, right? So I like distract the best one. I tend to use this the most. If we're thinking about Deputy Lopez, right? It could have been as simple as any one of those deputies simply saying, hey, Lopez, you need to go check in with the sergeant. He's got a question for you, and replace him. Done. That's, you know, hey, you got to go check this thing over here. It's like the best example. When I worked in the jail, we called it Sergeant Coffee. If Sergeant Coffee called you, you needed to move, right? And it was for your own safety as well as it was a distraction technique, right? A delegate is actually when we bring in other allies. So using our Deputy Lopez, a delegate might have been one of those patrol deputies saying, hey, LT, I think perhaps this guy's really getting underneath Lopez's skin. You know, why don't we swap him out, right? That's bringing in other people, because those road patrol deputies might not actually have direct experience with Lopez, but certainly the LT in the building does, right? So delegate is pulling in your allies. Health and wellness folks, there is nothing wrong with going to one of your colleagues and not gossiping, but saying, hey folks, I'm really worried about Abigail, but you seem to have a better relationship with her than I do. Here's our agency's EAP resources. Do you mind having a follow-up conversation with them, right? That's not gossiping, because I'm not gonna go tell 5 other people that I said that, right? You're not gonna do that. You're just gonna tell that delegate and try to bring them in to help. And direct could have been as simple as the lieutenant walking over and literally stepping in between and saying, all right, that's it, lock him down. You know, Lopez, I need you to head over to medical, right? At the moment that spit happened, there was time, trust me, I've seen the cameras, there was time for somebody to walk in and get in between them, but that time was not taken. That's a direct intervention. So those are some skills, because I wouldn't want you to leave here without them. Folks, what I'd like to share with you a little bit now, I'm switching gears from sort of giving you a slice of what we do in our training to what the training is all about. I have a slide here. You guys, this is in the app, this slide, as well as you're welcome to put things into the chat. But this is really meant to be more of a reflective exercise for you to think about with the people that you're supporting in public safety for training. And what do your staff tell you about the kind of trainings that they get? Are they actually using their health and wellness resources? Have they even heard of active bystandership? And how do you keep programs and trainings sustainable? Both at Able and Heroes, we find it critical to answer these questions before you embark on training or program around this, because if not, my observations, you're gonna run the risk of doing another policy mandate training. Please, please. Nobody likes policy mandate trainings, okay? I get that they're efficient, but for something as important as the prevention of harm, I ask you to consider something different. And ask your people what they want and how they want to be trained. I believe, because it's a perishable skill, it should include role plays and skill trainings and all of the above, right? That's how people really incorporate it from just the knowledge of I get it to I'm really going to do it. And you know this from all the other trainings that you provide. And if you have not heard a lot about active bystandership and you want to learn more than you've learned today, please contact me. I would be happy to geek out about this, but I would point you to the Department of Justice. DOJ updated their use of force policy in 2022. It included clear language around the duty to intercede is their language. They don't use intervene, they use the duty to intercede. And it also includes a section about training. Now, you could loosely say that that section from the DOJ is specific to the use of force, but personally, if I was consulting for you, I would say, don't make that assumption, man. If you're gonna be potentially sued, how about you just apply that training expectation to everything that's in that policy, including the duty to intercede, right? And one of the things that I often like to share is that when in an age where lawsuits are more and more common and the risk is high, how do you make sure that the quality behind your policy and mandates and your training and your skills practice is what you need it to be? So I've talked a little bit about ABLE and HEROES. HEROES, again, is active bystandership training for corrections, fire and rescue, for the larger public safety, criminal justice. And we believe strongly, though, that the training is really just a pathway to cultural change, to really becoming an organization and a culture that relies on active bystandership to get to all the outcomes that you have and to do so in a safe way. And ABLE is the same, but specifically for law enforcement. In this slide deck, again, it's available in the app. There are QR codes and the direct websites to both, so you can learn more in that way. I mentioned that it's an 8-hour training. I know that sounds like a long time, but I assure you that in 8 hours, you can ask Sheila if you don't want to take my word for it, but you don't sit down for 8 hours. We don't do lecture style because we, both ABLE and HEROES, use curriculum design to make sure that the training is really meeting adult learning and how they like to learn best. But it starts with an introduction. We really lean into that potential resistance and try to use that. We use social science, we use lots of games, interactive activities, and lots of skills and skills practice. It's one time 8 hours for the whole agency so that you shift that culture, right, to that active bystandership culture, and then it's an ongoing annual refresher after that to make sure that those skills stay fresh. Because active bystandership at the heart of it is peer intervention, we really prefer a T for T model, a train the trainer model. We want people hearing from their peers. I do train in both ABLE and HEROES as a national instructor, never by myself and never with another mental health professional, always with a partner, always with a law enforcement or a correctional officer, and that's not even the norm. Most of the times it's 2 police officers or 2 corrections or 2 fire and rescue. But with the 3-day T for T, day 1, people show up and you're a student. You learn the entire 8-hour curriculum. Day 2 is a teach back prep day, very intentional. We have folks tell us that this helps them with trainings that they provide that are not including to active bystandership because we really break it down. We kind of bring the behind the scenes science of curriculum design forward and put it in the hands of the agency instructors. And then we teach back. Because at ABLE and HEROES, we practice what we preach, and you need to demonstrate your skills. So then people spend a day in teach backs. Just some feedback from those T for Ts. Outside of active bystandership, I also do a lot of other training, de-escalation, suicide prevention. And so my experience is that these are pretty high numbers. You know, y'all are a tough audience to crack, law enforcement and corrections, for training. So this is pretty positive. I'll just read one of them, is that 84% stated after the T for T that they'll be able to apply what they learn. That's huge for us. That's what we want to hear. That's the goal of this, right? This sample feedback, again, is in the PowerPoint that's in the app, so you can access it and read it later. But I do just want to read the first one there, the second one, which is looking forward to the future of this program and hopefully be more to use this program in the future. I believe it is a way of thinking that will help staff. That's what we want to understand. Yes, it's a skill set, but it is a mental shift, active bystandership, and that's what we want, is people really leaving the T for T, not only ready to train their peers, but help be part of that workforce shift and that cultural shift. All right. Folks, we would love to know if you got a chance to snap that QR code. I'm going to briefly just share that in my home state in Colorado, and we got a couple other states, that we're looking at doing a statewide approach, and this is really to help leverage resources. We know that there are some agencies who are just trying to fill the shifts, and we want to kind of share. So if you're interested in a statewide approach, I would love to get that feedback. That would help me come back, right, to the state of Oregon and say, okay, it seems like there's interest. What can we do? But basically, when we're talking about a statewide approach, we're looking at doing statewide train the trainers in both ABLE and HEROES so they can help out all of that kind of public safety sector in the state. There's a couple of different ways that we've been modeling that, and ultimately we like to hear from folks about if there's an interest, what would you recommend and why? But one of the key points I want to highlight is that this doesn't mean that you're just slapping on 2 separate trainings. In this model, we're working to make sure that people get the advantages of both, but don't have to redo them, because certainly I know from Sheriff's Office experience, if you're a deputy, you're a deputy, you're a deputy, and you're going to work on all sides of that house. And so we want to make sure that it doesn't feel duplicative. Again, this will be in the deck, but this is ABLE's very specific contact information that you can access through the app, and the same for HEROES, contact information that you can access through the app. And like I said, I will certainly be here for the rest of today and tomorrow, in and out, and you can contact me. I'm not that hard to find. If you Google searched Abigail Tucker and police, you probably found me on LinkedIn. And if not, come and find me and I'll have to unscratch that. Okay, do we have any questions?
I don't currently see any in our queue here.
Awesome. That doesn't mean that there can't be any. If people have questions, feel free to put them in the app or put it through for the virtual audience. And the last thing that I guess I'll state, I'll keep an eye out in case a couple of questions do come through. So I really want to thank you for the time, and I want to thank CIS for identifying that active bystandership could be a great opportunity to learn about. For a large audience, you all have been very engaged, and I appreciate, for those of you who raised your hands and nodded your heads and popped into the chat, it certainly makes my job a lot easier. But mostly for those of you working in public safety, I want to thank you for the work that you do every single day. And for those of you who don't, I want to thank you for coming to learn more about this and how active bystandership can play a role in public safety. Thank you very much.